chimney breast, final chimney breast, final chimney breast.
Is it time for vinyl chimney breast?
Yes, it's week 11. Fashion Police! This week we take a look at some interesting, confusing and often best forgotten sartorial choices from some of our favourite rock stars. Beginning with Anthrax, this is the I'm a Man 12-inch single from 1987, their possibly ill-advised venture into rap metal. The band were known for their humour, for being a bit different to the other thrash metal bands. Certainly in their style of dress, they were known for Bermuda shorts, colourful clothing, which they said was just more comfortable for them to wear on a stage under the hot lights. Tommy Vance once said that they'd started a new metal fashion, and on this particular recording, on the cover of this, they're obviously dressed in a kind of hip-hop style. And as I've said before about some other releases, I was a fan of the band at the time, so I kind of felt like I ought to enjoy this, and I tried my best, but looking back, it's pretty terrible. One of the most infamous crimes against fashion in the world of metal happened someday in 1975, when this cover shot was taken, and amazing drummer Bill Ward wasn't sure what he was going to wear and simply asked his wife if he could borrow her red tights. Yeah. Cream Goodbye from 1969, this was their final album. It's a mixture of live and studio recordings, and they were known for stretching out for ages and ages on big extended jams in their live concerts. This is actually a good way to hear them doing that to a certain degree, but it's a bit more truncated on here, a bit more easy to digest, and the studio tracks are really good. It's got the classic single Badge, and the other two studio tracks are sort of quite eccentric and interesting, a bit like their outfits on the front. I think there was probably a bit of spray paint involved there, especially with the shoes. There was a time in the 80s when a lot of rock and metal bands were involved with sponsorship deals with clothing manufacturers, quite often sports clothing, and they were required to wear a certain number of outfits in photo shoots. Here and there, Iron Maiden did become known for this. There are some pretty dodgy outfits in some of their publicity photos from this time, but on this particular one that wasn't so much the case. It was more the choice of jumper of drummer Nico McBrain, which it has to be said is not very metal. Father Abraham and the Smurfs, Father Abraham in Smurfland from 1978. I tried to talk for roughly 30 seconds on each of the discs that I feature. Can I talk for 30 seconds about the fashion choices of the Smurfs? No. Richie Kotzen's second solo album from 1990. I remember back then thinking that he looked pretty cool on the cover, but on the back I wasn't really too sure about the blue cowboy boots, and the bass player's trousers don't really seem to work very well. The drummer looks pretty good, but again, probably spoils it with the boots. This is Gary Moore being released from Wormwood Scrubs, where he'd served a 10-year sentence for serious guitar abuse, and he's dressed fairly nattily there. This was an outfit that I think he wore a few times with Thin Lizzy as well. But what's more of interest, I think, is the clothing choice of his then girlfriend Donna Campbell. And I think if somebody who was waiting for me after a prison release was dressed like that, I'd possibly go back inside. Getting into metal in the 80s, it was all about leather and bullet belts and studs, and as Saxon famously sang, denim and leather brought us all together. But things were changing around about this time, 1986. It seemed a little bit odd to me to think of a band having a clothing designer working with them, and so I found it strange to read the credit of clothes by Fleur and Ray Brown in this Aussie album, and that's how they decided to dress them. I guess it kind of suited things at the time. There was another legendary fashion disaster that occurred in 1976 with Rush's choice of clothing for the photo sessions for the 2112 album, when they decided for some reason that silk kimonos were the way to go.
Hello.
And I suppose with the sci-fi theme of this record, they do look a bit like they could have been on Doctor Who or Blake's 7. But nevertheless, this has kind of haunted them ever since. But actually they never took themselves too seriously. Good job. Thanks for watching Vinyl Chimney Breast. All the music you can hear in the background is by See Through Head. You can find out more in the links under the description. Please click on everything, and I'll see you next week.